My name is David Hernández-Saca, and I'm an associate professor here at the University of Northern Iowa in the Literacy, Early Childhood, Special Education, and Library Studies Department. This is the beginning of my 10th year at the University of Northern Iowa. I did my PhD in curriculum and instruction with an emphasis in critical special education for school-wide equity and access. I also did a cognate in emotionality. I'm gay myself. I'm also a Palestinian and El Salvadorian, of Palestinian and El Salvadorian heritage. I came to the United States as a refugee and immigrant in 1984 because of the Civil War in El Salvador. And I think the work that I'm doing at the Jacobson Center is connected to not only literacy, but also disability. So on that journey from El Salvador, crossing the Rio Grande, I developed a high fever of 105 that I write about throughout my last about 20 years in relationship to learning to read and write. And so I was diagnosed with an auditory learning disability that shaped my personal and professional narratives. About a year ago, I published something based off of my dissertation, and I dubbed it as the Master Narratives of Learning Disabilities. So I took a look at the cultural, historical, the policy, and professional master narratives of learning disabilities. And because I was labeled with an auditory learning disability, but I was never really told that until I found out later on. So that was a pretty pivotal moment that also started my career in terms of leaning in with curiosity about what learning disabilities are. And so for my dissertation, I interviewed Latinx 7th and 8th graders about their learning disabilities, and if they were ever engaged with their teachers or their parents, if they ever had conversations. And it's interesting because the body of literature shows that, let's say for white students, with either autism or with learning disabilities, they might be told, and be more included than their Black, Indigenous, youth of color versus, their white peers. So that really, back in the early 2010s, the literature was showing that lack of engagement with BIPOC communities. So that really also led, in addition to my own personal experiences in special education, to looking at this, what I'm calling in this project, the triple helix of literacy, disability, and emotionality. What does it mean? What does it feel to write, to read, to communicate, to engage in meaning making? Maybe I wouldn't use the word meaning making, but their viewpoint, and also from like an emotion lens, but perhaps not like a traditional emotion lens, because a lot of my work comes from the social sciences of the affective turn. And so I think I would say that that's really important to rethink what the meaning of literacy is, disability, and emotionality, but not only for myself, selfishly, or for that 10-year-old, but also for teacher education. And what does it mean to think about the way we teach reading and writing, so that we're doing both the cognitive and the social emotional dimensions. When I interviewed, for example, in the past, those 7th and 8th graders, they used the word, am I smart or not smart, a lot. And that was sort of part of their discourse. And so I think it's this connection of like critical reflection, given personal narratives, emotions, and the meanings of literacy beyond the written word sometimes too. Not just, can a student decode words? How are they expressing themselves in the broadest sense of the term, in the written word, but also in other communicative means? I think the umbrella to my lines of inquiry is problematizing the common sense assumptions about what society or special education or general education believes, thinks, knows, enacts about the meanings of learning disabilities, broadly defined, but then historically in the field and in the discipline, researchers, others without disabilities, have defined what those learning disabilities are, as opposed to people who either have been labeled from the ground or kids about the meanings of learning disabilities. And I think perhaps that's the nucleus of the overall problem, and in a sense, the limitations of approaching what we know and what we do with that knowledge in K through 12 schools and beyond about the meaning of learning disabilities from more traditional special education frameworks that oftentimes locate or have implied and explicit deficit ideologies about, and I dub them as master narratives, which exclude sometimes or bifurcate between the cognitive dimensions and the social emotional dimensions, but also the intersectionalities of the lived experiences of kiddos who are Black, Indigenous, youth of color with disabilities, and how these labels might manifest themselves differently in a Black body versus a white body or an immigrant body. One story I could share, I remember going to, because I was in special ed most of my K through 12, I've had experiences in high school, like going to my school psychologist and having like psychological tests, when you have to like match figures together or something like that. And then one story that I don't know if I've written about this, but she told me to do that, and then I like matched these figures, and then I matched them, and I said, "Oh, I'm done." And then she said, "Are you sure you're done?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm sure I'm done." And she said, "Look down." And then I looked down, and I didn't have one of the figures, and then this rush of emotion like just came up, and I felt so embarrassed. But I don't remember she doing anything about it. So that's one story. Another story I have is when I was taking the SAT. I went to my adjacent high school to take that test, and the neighboring high school. And I walk into the building, and in big letters, and I have written about this in one of my past collective critical autoethnographies with some colleagues. And in big letters, and in the hall, it said David Hernández-Saca, special education, go over here. You know, I didn't expect that to be in the hallway. That was horrible, do you know? And so I've had these different incidences throughout my K through 12 experiences that shaped the way that I, was emotionally charged regarding special education. And historically, in hindsight, in my own writing, I've been trying to heal and write about all these experiences at the same time having a healthy sense of self and understanding, either on the one hand forgiving, but also doing something for the common good. When I was working with Lori, it's the opportunity to develop further my voice and develop like my perspective, as opposed to taking what society or what even textbooks say about the meaning of a learning disability, the meaning of literacy, and the meaning of emotionality. One of the challenges that I continue to face is the common sense assumptions about what learning disabilities are, and in relationship to literacy as well, and emotionality. Because I'm coming from a very different lens, on the one hand, that can be very isolating, but at the other hand, I always follow my spirit, if that makes sense. And that could be challenging because, it's not that I'm trying to be challenging or that I'm trying to be confrontational, but I'm trying to have some fidelity to what's coming up for me in my heart and my mind and my past experiences, and putting that on the table. And so I think one of the challenges is to be more clear about what I mean, how I mean it, why I mean what I mean. So it's a challenge. And so the other thing is to really then analyze policies that, you might, as from my theoretical perspective or whatnot, see biases that are institutionalized, but then immediately nothing could be done about it right there and then. Reflecting in this interview has helped me be clear about my own ideological commitments, ideological clarity, organizational clarity. But then how do we reflect on the past and the present and into the future in ways that can co-create new directions regarding, what does this mean for policy? What does this mean for theory? What does this mean for the reauthorization of idea? And the ways in which we think about the meanings of literacy, disability, and emotionality in more inclusive, contextually nuanced ways in educational practice and praxis. I'm really excited and humbled to be able to do this work, in ways that it's really a vocation for me, and I submit my colleagues as well. So So yeah.